Hey everybody, waitingfornextyear.com podcast. I'm your host Craig Lindell, and today we're going to talk to Kevin Kleps of Crain's Cleveland Business. But before we get there, I want to tell you about the 57 good friends of Waiting for Next Year that are supporting us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/WFNY. Nobody has to support us, but some people, 57 of you to be exact, have chosen to do so. In exchange for that extra support, we try and give you some extra details about the site and how we do things. We try and I give people a heads up on, different podcast guests that we're having. So they knew that Kevin Kleps was coming on well before you're hearing it right now. They also know the next one or two guests that I'm working on. So when I don't want to jinx it in public, I still tell the people at Patreon because I want them to start thinking and giving me questions and giving me feedback. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking to do for the people on Patreon, including we also have a special T-shirt coupon code for GV Art, something that many Cleveland sports fans love. Only the people who support Waiting for Next Year on Patreon have access to that. That's patreon.com/WFNY for as little as $1 a month. You can stand to be counted. Of course, we'd love it if you'd support even more of that, but you don't have to. And nobody has to support at all. It's all bonus, all benefit, and we appreciate the 57 of you that do that. So it's Patreon, patreon.com/WFNY. Thanks so much to everybody who does that. And now here's Kevin Kleps from Kevin Kleps from Crain's Cleveland Business. Easy for me to say.
Waiting for next year.
Somewhere out there is a man with a name that's hard to pronounce, along with the paper he works for. I stumbled over in the intro that you haven't heard yet, Kevin. Kevin Kleps of Crain's Cleveland Business. I did it right that time.
It's a bit of a tongue twister.
I know, I'm telling you. So we have talked before, but I believe it was in reference to something you were doing about the A to Z podcast.
Yeah, it was. When I wrote a big story on what Andre and Zach are doing, and found out that you were a big producer of it. So yeah, that was the last time.
You know what's really cool is I sat down with Zach a few times, and he knows how to do all his own editing and everything else now, and so now I'm kind of like the former producer of the A to Z podcast.
I'm sure they'll still have to lean on you at some point. Zach likes to make fun of his problems doing that.
He's gotten pretty good at pushing the right buttons, as he would say. But yeah, so I wanted to reach out to you, especially wanted to reach out to you after I heard you on another podcast. I heard you on Tom Valentino's podcast, which is one that I like very much. And it occurs to me that you have kind of, I said in the opening that I think you maybe have one of the best Cleveland sports gigs in the media market, because not everybody is bumping their heads on the way to your stories.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I'm lucky enough where they at Crain's, they kind of give me the freedom to kind of go between the three big teams and make that large part of my focus. And yeah, I don't have to worry about the game stories. I don't have to worry about roster moves. I can focus more on kind of the big picture stuff as it relates to our readers, which are mostly businessmen and businesswomen who are wondering about attendance and sponsorships and ads and that kind of stuff, which is, there aren't a lot of people who write about that stuff. There's there's plenty who do it nationally, but on a local basis, I don't know if there's too many in Cleveland, and there aren't many in a lot of cities either. Just we're kind of a niche publication that we really concentrate on that, and it's been a lot of fun, and it really has. It's like I said, they give me the freedom to do that, and I really focus most of my efforts on those three teams, because that's what, as you know, any sports fan in Cleveland, they're so heavily focused on the big three.
So when you're going about your weekly routine, daily routine, whatever it is, how is it that you come across a story and figure out which ones look and smell and feel right for your audience and what you're doing? How much of it do you think is something where you're like not manufacturing, but like kind of building, I don't know how to say it, but it's not like you're scouring Twitter and waiting for them to come to you. They feel a little bit more produced or manufactured.
Yeah, it's like I kind of write for two different audiences. There's the digital audience where I write a blog pretty much every day that is more the general stuff that you see on Twitter and on Facebook and everything, where I'm looking at something that the Cavs did that might even be a roster move, and I kind of look at the big picture of how it's going to affect their season, or something the Indians did with season tickets or something like that, that is kind of the breaking news of the day that I just happen to hear or happen to see on Twitter, and then I react to. And so that's part of what I do. And then we have the weekly print edition, which is that's always more analytical and big picture and that kind of stuff. So those are the stories that take longer to work on. Those are the stories where you have to talk to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people and kind of form your thoughts based on what they're saying and what the teams are saying, and kind of look at really tackle an issue. Those are the stories that take longer to produce, and those are ones that sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes you get those fed to you where somebody has something that they want to promote, and you know the difference between a good pitch and a bad pitch. And sometimes there are good pitches where you're like, oh, this is interesting, and they're willing to give it to me first, and I just have to run with it and try to do a good job with it and talk to other people about it and make sure it doesn't sound just like a PR campaign. And then there's other ones where I hear about something and I'll approach the team or the organization, whoever it pertains to, and say, look, this is what I heard. Can we talk about this? Or it might just be something that comes from a press release, like one that I'm going to be writing pretty soon about the Cavs doing a social network that is pretty unique in pro sports that really no one else is doing. It's kind of like Facebook, but it's much better than that from everything I've heard. I'm not a subscriber yet. I still have to do that. But from everything I've heard, it's better than Facebook, and it's strictly for Wine and Gold United members. So they can, and it's more secure. It's more, it's not something where you have to worry about just people just bashing everything they see left and right. It's more of a controlled environment. So I see a press release like that, and I think, oh, that's interesting. I don't need to write a news story about it because it's already been on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. I can look at the big picture, how they're going to use this and what it could mean for the fans, what it could mean to the organization from maybe a revenue standpoint or an interest standpoint. And I just kind of base it on everything that's in the news. And then if it's something that interests me, I try to figure out if it's something that I can make a more analytical or big picture story on.
Well, I feel like I should ruin your social media story off the bat because I already logged in, and like I'm not rooting against it, but it feels pretty half baked, and it seems kind of weird to try and pretend like your fans just aren't like living on Facebook and Twitter, or you're going to create a place where that's kind of competing directly with Facebook and Instagram, and think you're going to kind of come out on top, or like, there's no room for a niche even in this world.
That's the thing is I'll readily admit that I haven't gone that far down the road with it. It was just something that kind of interested me, and I talked to one of the Cavs digital guys about it, and he's a guy who's pretty well respected in the industry. So I got his thoughts on it, and then I haven't done my own digging. I know there's a basic web version where if you just go to the homepage, it looks like Facebook generic. But then I'm told that the app is much different, and once you subscribe and once you're a member of one of the certain groups, it's way more advanced than that. But I haven't, like I said, I haven't gone down that road yet. And I can understand what you mean because we already have so much influence by each of these social networks, and so many fans want to go to those networks anyway. I know the Cavs are looking at it's a kind of a separate thing where all these other. The fans are going to be on all these other sites anyway, but this is a way for if the fans who just hate the negativity they see on Twitter or they get annoyed by the political stuff on Facebook, this is a way for the Cavs to reach them and have them interact just strictly on there without the other noise. It's just totally Cavs. It's not going to be in between Facebook political discussion or obviously you could do that on Twitter on your own by just following certain groups and stuff, but the Cavs think that this can be a unique way to do it.
Yeah, well, and like I said, my review is way too early. I've only spent probably 15 or 20 minutes total playing with it, and I have not seen the app yet. So
yeah,
that's just
you and I are in the same boat then, because I think I've probably done about as much as you.
All right, so I wanted to talk about something that you wrote today, something that broke over the weekend, and there's probably not that much to say other than this guy Austin, who had a Twitter handle called Jobu Lives. He passed away, and it was like one of those times where we, especially on this podcast, we spend a lot of time talking about why Twitter is the worst and why social media can be a harsh place to be and the worst place to be and why it's bad and it removes humanity. And then something really, truly bad in real life happens. A guy passes away, and you see like the power of good of social media as people get together to not only honor the guy but raise a bunch of money for his kids and his family.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's stuff that we have our everyday annoyances with Twitter and with Facebook, but then something like this happens, and it just makes you appreciate how by getting the word. I mean, there's no other vehicle that's better for something like this than Twitter or Facebook. And just once that starts spreading, I wrote a blog this morning about Austin Landau, Jobu Lives, and I believe he was 34 when he died. He had a massive stroke over the weekend. And I talked to him back in 2011, like shortly after he created the Jobu Lives Twitter account, because I saw something that was retweeted by Mark Shapiro because he had met him in Heritage Park, and Shapiro started using the bat magic phrase to Austin, and Austin just loved it and then tweeted about it and took a picture with him, and Shapiro retweeted it. That's how it got into my timeline. So I thought it was interesting. So I wrote a story about it, just like a big picture use of, at the time, Shapiro and even Antonetti was on Twitter then. The Indians were pretty active on Twitter before most teams were from an executive standpoint. So I wrote a story about that, and when he passed away over the weekend, it just struck me. You follow these accounts, and a lot of times there's no name behind the account, and there's no face, there's no name. It's just a caricature. But with this guy, I actually knew who was behind the account, and it just really made me sad, because from everything I had heard, I only talked to him on the phone, but from everything I had heard, he was just a great, great guy who just loved his family and was just this dedicated father. Good. He worked for a construction company and was a hard worker and everything else. And it was just sad. And I wrote about that, and Indians Twitter yesterday was tweeting about it, and somebody, I think it was Sports Yelling, tweeted out the GoFundMe information, and then she spread the word. And when I checked this morning, it was already over 6,000. It hadn't even been up for, I don't think, 18, 19 hours.
And as we're talking, it's just over 7,000 now.
That's great. That really is. And I was checking our web numbers, and a lot of times you might post a story and it just doesn't pick up any steam. This one was getting.
I have no idea what you're talking about. All our stories go viral.
Yeah, that's the way in our head they do, but they don't always work out that way. But it had been shared on Facebook last I saw like 500 or 600 times,
that's beautiful.
So it's spreading around pretty good, and hopefully that the ones who do share it will actually click on the GoFundMe account and contribute, because I know he had a baby daughter, and I know he had another daughter that couldn't have been older than 4 or 5.
Well, the baby daughter was born in December. So
yeah, it's so sad. And he had his other daughter. I remember seeing pictures of her that he had tweeted her. His fiance had tweeted that she couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, and she was just as cute as could be. It's just, really sad story. But this is when social media is a really darn good thing. Just the way people responded and contributed and shared stories and everything else was awesome.
Well, there was something about 2016 with the Cavaliers winning, and then when the Indians went on that run, there were so many of these people who otherwise had been faceless kind of Twitter personalities that I ended up meeting throughout the Indians playoff run in really random ways around Progressive Field, and I never met Austin, but that whole community actually started to exist in reality as well as just on Twitter, at least in my mind, for me personally, and so this is a reminder that there was something more than just the electronic bits going back and forth. But there was something about 2016 that brought it all together.
Oh, for sure. No doubt. It was just a incredible year. It really was. It was so strange how it was great, but it was also strange. If you've lived here for any amount of time, just how the Cavs winning a title just completely changed the mindset of so many sports fans. Not all of them, but so many. There's still some bitter Browns fans who are only looking from that perspective, but just they actually started to believe that, wow, good things can happen in Cleveland sports teams. And then the Indians start making a run, and instead of, oh my God, this is going to be terrible, this is going to be another heartbreak, it turned into, wow, we could win 2 in a row. We could be the home to the MLB and the NBA champs, and it all changed. And Indians Twitter is kind of a strange, fun place anyway, just because they might have a smaller hardcore fan base than the other two teams, but they are very, I don't know a lot of them, but they seem to be, from an outsider's perspective, I've only talked to a couple of them, just a very tight-knit group who they go to the games and they hang out, and they seem to all be friends, and they all get to know each other, even though you don't see their names, you just see Monty the Color Man and Sports Yelling and everyone else. They actually know each other, and they know their names, and they know the faces behind the Twitter handles and all that. They get to be friends. It's just the Indians Twitter. I mean, every team has their hardcore group of social media users who I'm sure have some kind of bond, but Indians Twitter seems to have more of a bond than a lot of the teams. It might be a smaller one, like I said, but they seem to have a pretty strong bond. And then something like this happens with Joe Boo, with Austin Landau, and it seems to bring everyone together even more.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a bigger market, like there would be equivalent in Yankees fans, but maybe there are. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there are, just because you get those niche. It might be a small segment of the Yankees, but I'm sure there is something where they just diehard fans who go back and forth over every move. But yeah, it does seem to be, the Indians Twitter seems to have a special thing going on.
All right, so let's talk some kind of current events. You recently reported that the Indians are already 4 months ahead of schedule. I think probably over 1.2 million tickets sold. They did 1.59 all of 2016. So it's no doubt they're gonna surpass last year, and they're probably gonna start challenging for kind of modern records in 2007 and 2008, where they're kind of in that $2.5 million fan range. But one thing that I've always said on this podcast about Indians attendance, hashtag Indians attendance, is that they needed to put back-to-back years together. And this seems like the first time in a very long time that they're really, really, truly, actually, undeniably poised to challenge for that.
No doubt. I wrote a while back, it had to be like a month ago, maybe more than that I thought they could get to 2 million. And at the time I was like, I admit this is kind of a crazy thing, but just with the way they're going, I kind of think it's possible. Now 2 million might be low, but yeah, they still need to, now that they have the season ticket base up over 12,000, they have way more of a cushion than they've had in a long time. But they still need to get off to a good start. Like, this could all go for naught if they start 12-30, or if Kipnis's shoulder is a lot worse than everyone is saying, and Brantley never comes back, and the pitching staff gets hit by injuries, and they just end up being not very good. I mean, they've already sold a lot of tickets for all these Friday and Saturday games in the summertime, but that's not going to solve the problem on weekdays in April and May, and when school's still going on in early June, and in September when kids are back in school and football starting. They haven't solved everything, obviously, but this is a hell of a start, and they have a real chance here to if they make another playoff run, that's just going to add to it even more, and next thing you know, you're going to have 15, 16, 17,000 season ticket holders, and then you're going to have relatively packed ballpark almost every night of the week, which is so much different than they've had. I mean, you're never going to have sellout crowds, I don't think, during the week in like April and May. It's just that was the Jacobs Field. That was a totally different circumstance and a totally different time. But they have a real chance here to actually have pretty respectable attendance for at least, I would think, for the foreseeable future, as long as they keep performing on the field. But as I said, I really do think they need to start strong again, just to erase any remaining doubt that there might be from those fans who still haven't totally bought in.
So anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I'm a bit of a jerk, especially when it comes to Mark Shapiro. I blame him for a lot of things, and I fully recognize that maybe I'm being unfair, but I think it was just everything was a little bit stale. It was time for a change of pace, and he got a really good job, and that change of pace occurred. But how much of this do you think actually has to do with changing names at the top of the management board, and how much of it is just like kind of the confluence of timing and a little bit of luck, and it just finally came together?
I think the latter is a really good part of it, but I was a big fan of Mark. I understood.
I was
why,
too at the beginning, by the way. But
yeah, I understood why he rubbed people the wrong way, and when you hear the same market challenges and that kind of stuff over and over again, that's going to drive you insane. And I totally get that, but I mean, just on a personal level, from everything I know and everything I experienced, he's a really good guy who was incredibly well respected in baseball and worked his ass off. But when there's no doubt that after he left, yeah, they had the pieces in place, but if he's there, I really don't know if they make the Andrew Miller trade. And if they don't make the Andrew Miller trade, does last year happen?
No.
I don't. They still have a good year, but I don't think they have a year to the extent that they had. I don't think they're playing the Cubs in the World Series and coming within a win of winning it all. I just don't see that happening. I don't know if Shapiro would have signed off on that trade. I mean, it's up to the Dolans, obviously. They have the final say, but I don't think it gets to the Dolans' desk if Shapiro doesn't want it to, and I'm not sure if Shapiro would have wanted that move. Antonetti definitely seems to be more of a risk taker, which he proved not only with the Miller deal, but then he follows up with trying to get he actually did get Jonathan Lucroy for a minute until it got shot down by the player, and then they turn around and sign Encarnacion for $20 million a year, which is just that one just blew me away.
And then they were still in on Bautista.
Exactly, they're still on Bautista, and then they turn around and sign a sixth or seventh inning reliever for $5 or $6 million a year, which they just kept going, and that's all stuff that I don't know. I mean, Shapiro might have been on board with. I don't know. It's probably unfair to say that he wouldn't have been, but Antonetti definitely seemed to be more willing to take on risk than Shapiro. Shapiro was very risk adverse. He would always talk about declining value. Once you sign a free agent, they're a declining asset, like from the get-go. And how would he have looked at a left-handed specialist making $9 million a year? So I don't know, especially when you're trading away Clint Frazier. So I kind of have a feeling that he wouldn't have been too keen on that. And if, like we talked about, if they don't make that deal, do they make that run? So yeah, I do think part of it was Mark leaving ended up being kind of a window for Antonetti to maybe change some things, and the moves he made, man, did they pay off.
Yeah, and I'm not sure any other team in Major League Baseball. I'm about to give Terry Francona all the credit for Andrew Miller in a lot of ways, but I'm not sure that any team wouldn't have just taken that guy and said, "Oh yeah, he's our closer. We're going to trust him to get 3 outs." And here's Francona kind of redefining the middle reliever as like one of the most important positions on the team, and using Andrew Miller for 6 or more outs. And so a weird year, man.
It really was. I mean, it was brilliant what Tito did, and I'm sure they have guys in the front office. I don't know exactly how many, but there's at least, I think, 4 former Baseball America writers in that front office. And there's somebody from the Hardball Times, there's somebody that's from Baseball Perspective. I'm sorry, Baseball Prospectus, and those are websites that would be all for what Tito did and all for breaking down why you should use Andrew Miller in the most important situation of the game, not just the ninth inning, whenever it's most important, the highest leverage situation. And I'm sure all of those guys and other people in the front office present that information to Tito, but he doesn't have to use it. And to his credit, he did, and it was incredible the way he managed that bullpen last year. And that was just, it's not usually a bullpen, aside from when the closer comes in the ninth inning, isn't that exciting. But man, last year was incredible. It really was, and just the bullpen was one of the highlights of it. It was just amazing.
All right. Well, we can finish maybe trying to find something to laugh about with the Browns, but I do want to talk a little bit about the Cavs and their and I don't want to dwell on the negatives with the Cavaliers, and I don't think that necessarily the stadium issue that I want to bring up to you is really a Cavaliers issue as much as it's a larger meta, national thing with regards to how American governments fund private stadiums, public-private stadiums, however you want to word that. But because, I mean, obviously the Cavaliers are a good story. So then to really try and look and find a way to make them a bad story, let's just presume, because it always seems to happen this way, that the city is going to pay for that expansion to the Q, and it's all going to go through. What does it take for Cleveland to finally stop or put their foot down? Or is Cleveland just too gun-shy because of the Browns' history and the team moving to Baltimore?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think they're too gun-shy. If the teams want something and they really push for it, it's hard for the county and the city to say no. I mean, I think the Browns are always going to get thrown around as a possibility anytime any team wants something. That's just the way it is. And as you touched on, this isn't the only place this is happening in, and unfortunately, it's gotten to be the norm almost everywhere. Very few cities say no to these teams. It happened in Pittsburgh recently with the Steelers, where the Pittsburgh Sports Commission just said no, and there's a big fight going on between the teams there and the Sports Commission. But that's far from the norm.
Of course, San Diego, but you're right. It's not the norm.
No, not at all. I think all of us wish that it would be. I don't want to, as you said, I don't want to knock the Cavs here too much. I have really mixed feelings on this whole thing. I see the benefit of it, and I also wonder why it has to be this way. I really don't. I'm not sure I've ever been so torn on a subject as I am this one, just because of the money involved and the Q doing so well as it is. I understand why they want to do it, but it just I don't know. I'm pretty torn on it,
and I love the project. I think it's going to be great for the Q. I think it's going to be great for the city. It's just I've been to those debates or those public meetings or whatever where the Cavaliers brass and the people from the Gateway, they talk about, well, cities always provide infrastructure for this, that, and the other thing. And I'm always kind of like, well, yeah, you give somebody roads and maybe you help with the sidewalks outside a grocery store, but you don't build their grocery store for them. You don't own their grocery store and rent it back to them for almost no money. Yeah, it's such a one-sided thing.
Yep. And the Cavs do a ton for the region. There's no doubt they do.
And Dan Gilbert is the best of kind of that. If sports owners are a bad breed, he's one of the best. I mean, he just is.
There's no doubt. My big thing with this is it has to be about more than just bringing the All-Star game here. The All-Star game was the one that was thrown out as, if we do this is going to happen. We're going to get the All-Star game. That's great, but that's only a temporary weekend. That's an extended weekend of partying, and no doubt that brings visitors and that brings money into the region, but that's just a temporary blip. It's got to be more than that. And does this improvement bring in something that wouldn't have come to the Q anyway, because the Q is one of the busiest arenas in the world? So my thing is I want to see what they do with it if they get this money, which it looks like they're gonna. So I think we judge them on it after we can all react to it and we can all disagree or agree on whether we think it's good or not. But we really need to look at what they do with it once it goes through, which it seems like it's gonna. Just do they bring in events that they're not already bringing in? Because they already get a ton of concerts, they already get big name acts, they already get cool events, they get the Disney on Ice, they get all that stuff. What else are they going to get besides the All-Star game? That's going to be how I think I'm going to judge this deal. If they bring in stuff that they weren't doing before and it ends up being good for the region, then okay, then maybe this is worth it. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
When it's
like I said, I'm really torn on it.
It's so complex for the average citizen too, because I got involved at least in as far as interviewing people when the sin tax thing was going on, and no matter how you felt about that, up, down, left, right, whatever your feelings were, that went to a vote, and fair or not, it passed. The people voted it in. Maybe it was up for some people complained that the suburbs were allowed to vote for something that disproportionately hurt the city or whatever else, but it did go to a vote. It feels like a lot of these things are kind of more like backroom deals, and the loudest people are never listened to. Yeah,
I could understand why people. The one thing about another thing about all this was it was negotiated before. I mean, there's been the hearings, there's been the public hearings, there's been the chance for people to ask questions, but the deal came about before it got to the public point. So that's something you would like to see maybe have done more in public, but I don't know, maybe that's not possible in these situations because it would be impossible to get all the nitty gritty done if they're having hearings on every little thing. I don't know, but it's such a difficult situation and I don't know. I see both sides and I don't know what the solution is because teams are going to get it from somebody if they don't get it from whoever in town, whatever arena or whatever city or county they're looking for. They're going to get it from someone. That's the bad part about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, last but not least, let's talk about the Browns and just kind of, from the perspective of your beat and how you go about covering the sports scene for Crains. How do you look at an off season where they ship a home game to London and they quote unquote lower ticket prices in certain areas? I mean, on the one hand, you've got the Indian story where you're reporting these amazing volume increases. Where do you go to cover the Browns in such a rebuilding kind of a year?
They're at a crossroads, and I'll admit I don't fully know where to go with them right now, just because I don't know where they're at the strangest point since they came back in 1999,
which is saying something.
It really is, because even the diehard fans seem to be at a different point where they don't know. They're still going to follow them, they're still going to support them, but they're not as invested as they used to be. They kind of just expect things to not be good, and they just kind of they don't have high expectations. There's no new year brings new promise type of thing where in the past even when they stunk, which was almost every year, there would be a new year, new hope. There'd be a new quarterback, a Johnny Manziel or something like that would get their hopes up.
Colt McCoy will get it done.
That is still the one thing that could get them back to being the biggest game in town, which they no longer are, is to get that young quarterback. That's the thing that could get everyone back on board.
That's exactly what my house is like too, by the way.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. Don't apologize at all. I have a
4-year-old son, and I'm like going from room to room to try to avoid whatever room he's going in.
I've got 4 and 6, and so the wrestling matches just get louder. Right before I dialed you up, there was like huge bumps, and it sounded like thunder going on. So, you've been very, very generous with your time. I really appreciate you coming on anyway.
No problem, Craig. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, I hope you'll come do it again sometime.
No problem. Sounds good.
All right. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.